Many years ago, I made a play table for my children that literally got used every day. So this week, just in time for Christmas, I'm going to show you how to do the same, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, or just wanting to give a present to those who've got children, all for less than £30. Whoops. So yes, as I said, this is a great piece of kit to have in the house if you've got children or grandchildren, or if you want to make someone a Christmas present who has children. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. I made something very similar to this for my children over 20 years ago, and it immediately turned into the most used toy stroke piece of furniture we had in the house. It was used and abused every day of the week for a number of years until they grew out of it, and then I took it apart and I think I used the material for something else. Today I'm going to be using 18mm MDF, and this is going to take around about half to 3/4 of an 8x4 sheet. I bought this sheet in a local DIY shop that has a panel saw, and I got them to cut it up into 4 pieces, and I did that for 3 reasons. Firstly, it means you can get it in the car. Secondly, it means that the top of the table has already been cut exactly to size. This is 1100 by 550, or just under 4 foot by just under 2 foot, which means I don't have to do anything with this piece. But more importantly, the second cut, I got them to cut in such a way that's going to help the build. Let me explain. So rather than just giving them the measurements of the size I want for the top of this, I got them to cut a strip of the 8x4 sheet, the right width for the top. And then I got them to put the 2 pieces of MDF over the top of each other and both lined up with a stop at one end. And then got them to cut the length of the table, which is 1100. That gives me 4 pieces of MDF, but more importantly, the pieces that are left over are now exactly the same width and length as the top. So if this is the top, that's difficult to do backwards, it means that the stiffeners I want to put underneath the top in this direction, I can cut out of this piece of ply, because this is exactly the same width. And any lengths that I want to put in this direction, I can cut out of this piece of, I was going to say ply, but it's actually MDF, in this direction. So this should help the build, because it does mean that I've now got material exactly the right width and exactly the right length for me to cut for stiffeners or side pieces or whatever, which is millimetre perfect, even if the panel saw didn't cut millimetre perfect, because they've both been cut through at the same time with a stop. They're exactly the same, which is really the important thing. It does obviously mean that I've still got some cuts to do, so I think I need to break out the plunge saw and make some sawdust. Having recently bought this cheap track saw, I am so glad I did. It's perfect for quick cuts on the workbench like this, instead of setting up the table saw, especially if you've got a small or full workshop like I have. For exposed corners, I found a piece of 1.5 inch pipe just to use as a template, then took off most of the material with my jigsaw before sanding the rest down to the line. all the exposed edges, I then round over with a small radius round over bit on the benchtop router. I've set the fence up here, although you'll see that I'm not actually touching it with the workpiece. I've just set it up because it's really good for dust extraction. Very good. There's nothing like a bit of cutting and routing to heavy metal. Very Colin Firth. Now, I'm always very well aware when I use something like the tabletop router that most people don't have them. It's probably the perfect tool to do this sort of routing on MDF. But, you know, I spent 55 of my 56 years without one as well. So there's other ways of doing it. And the way I like to do it, if you haven't got something like that, is just with something like a block plane or a normal plane. And it takes a little bit longer, but it's completely achievable. Come and have a look. So this isn't rocket science, but once you've got the hang of it, it's actually pretty quick. And all I'm going to do is take off most of the material with the block plane and then just round it over with some sandpaper. So I'm going to start at a 45-ish type angle and just take a number of passes at this angle just to take off that corner. And each time I take a pass, it just gets wider and you just generally take more material. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to stop there. Then it's as simple as just taking off the two corners you've just created. So now I'm going to angle my plane to take off this higher corner here, and just a few passes means that that starts rounding over quite nicely. And now I'm just going to angle it the other way just to take off the other side, just making like a round over by a series of straight lines. Okay, that's about as far as we're going to go with the block plane. Now the rest can just be done with some sandpaper, or what I like to use, which is just sanding block. And it doesn't take very long before you're starting to replicate quite a nice round over. And definitely it doesn't have to be perfect because this MDF is being painted. When I paint it, it's going to hide a multitude of sins. So really, I think that is near enough. And I must say that didn't really take that long. So if you haven't got a tabletop router or any type of router, that is the way to do it. Right, I've done the cutting, done the routing. I think I need to do some painting, but maybe not to heavy metal. After prematurely getting excited about starting some painting, I realised that I've got some work to do first on the hanging storage. So I work out what size hangers I need for these boxes that I bought. This gives me the size of the cutout I need to do on the front, so I can insert them and they're all out of the way. And this sort of cut is where the plunge saw really comes into its own, where it's got a stop and a start position in the middle of a piece of timber. I couldn't do this safely with a normal circular saw. So just off camera, I've been cutting some runners for a couple of boxes that I intend to hang underneath. And what I'm going to do is these runners are going to go in that sort of configuration. And then I've got a couple of these IKEA boxes that will slide in there and hang underneath. And I've just tapered the front of these hangers just to make it easier to get the box in. And spacing wise, I think they're going to be spaced about 18mm. So I'll use an offcut to space them. And that'll be just about right for the 12mm lip that you've got around these boxes. So they'll run in there and they'll just hang underneath the top. And these will be handy for storage of Thomas the Tank Engine stuff, Lego, Blue Tack, all that old stuff, because you can never have too much storage. I've just used some of my MDF for the runners here, which has saved me buying additional wood. And a bit of glue and pinned or screwed if you don't have a nailer secures them permanently. And now, with everything cut and sanded, I can now give everything a coat of primer. For the top, I want to paint a colourful landscape that children can play with, so I channel my inner arts and crafts and set about painting whatever comes to mind, just with some standard acrylic paint. On each end, I glue and screw more pieces of MDF on the inside that will essentially position the table when it's assembled. Any holes I've drilled to secure the top or the runners are now filled with filler, sanded and then painted. Cost-wise, the 3/4 inch sheet of ply that I'm using cost me £33 and I have around about a quarter of it left over. On top of that, all I've used is some screws and paint, so I would say that the total cost for this table is just under £30. So that's the table finished, and the only fixings that are visible are the screws at each end that join the end panels to the body of the table, which I'm going to leave as they are for now, just in case I need to take it apart and put it in the car to move it. I'm really happy with the way this has come out, although I'm not really sure if my river and associated infrastructure, which I painted on the top, is really up to scratch. Although I do know from experience that children don't take any notice of it and they just get on and play irrespective. The two storage boxes are really useful for all of the toys and other important stuff, and definitely an enhancement on what I built all those years ago. I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's given you some ideas for Christmas presents or projects in the future. Remember, subscribe, Patreon, all that sort of stuff, and I will see you next time. Still didn't work.